Okay, so let's look at an IELTS Task 1 essay, okay, which is the analysis of a line graph, okay? So let's take a look at the topic. The graph below shows average carbon dioxide emissions per person in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Italy, and Portugal between 1967 and 2007. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. Okay, so this is one of the key things to remember to be doing in your IELTS Task 1 section. I think a lot of candidates forget to be making comparisons throughout. Okay, and so this is a really good chance for you to show more sophisticated grammar or a higher level of grammar by doing different types of comparisons using vocabulary and different sentence structures. Okay, so first let's take a look at this graph together and see what we can find out from this graph. Okay, so it's an average carbon dioxide emission per person between 1967 to 2007, okay? So the first thing I always tell my students to do, check what's the tense, okay? So everything's going to be written past tense, okay? Then what's the sort of time period? So it's over, sudden maths, it's over a 40-year period, okay? So you can start brainstorming different ways to paraphrase the years over a 40-year period or over 4 decades, okay? So let's look at what we've got. So we've got the CO2 emissions in metric tons, okay? And then we've got the years along the bottom. So let's take a look at the UK. So the UK here, we can see at this top line here is kind of like a decline, okay? And how would you describe that? I would probably describe that as steady decline. Okay, Sweden, we've got a sharp increase and then a sharp decrease, and then a gentle or gradual decrease. Okay, and then Italy and Portugal, we can both see quite similarly, both have a sort of a steady or a gradual increase. Okay, so if I'm thinking, what are the main features? Okay, so what are the main trends? Well, generally, for 2 countries, there was a decline, and for 2 countries, there was an increase. Okay. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of general trends. Sweden is interesting to talk about. So you probably want to highlight Sweden because it has this sort of big increase, big decrease, and then gradual decrease. So you'd probably definitely want to talk about Sweden more specifically. Okay, and then you could probably compare, while the UK had a gradual decrease, both Italy and Portugal had a gradual increase. Okay, so those are the features I think I would want to select and talk about. So once you've taken a look at the graph, you should go on with writings. Let's take a look at what this candidate's done. The line chart presents the per capita average of CO2 emitted in 4 European countries from 1967 to 2007. Okay, perfectly fine paraphrase. Nothing really wrong with that paraphrase. So then we need the overview. Okay, overall, the average CO2 emissions of individuals in the United Kingdom and Sweden generally dropped, whereas emissions per person in Italy and Portugal rose considerably. I don't know if I would say rose considerably. Considerably means a lot. Okay, fair enough. I'll give it to this candidate. I would say, okay, that's a considerable increase. Okay, I'll give them that. Despite the steady reduction, average emissions in the United Kingdom were the highest in the given period. Okay, that's an interesting thing to pick out. Okay, that even though they kept reducing, the United Kingdom was still at the top compared to the other countries. Okay, so this is a perfectly fine overview, okay? They've summarized the main trends, okay? And so now I kind of have an idea of what they're going to talk about. This is probably going to be body 1, and this is probably going to be body 2, okay? Paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Then it's going to give me more details about what was happening in each section. So as an overview, I think that's a pretty good overview. I don't have many problems with that. So let's take a look at the first paragraph. Looking at the graph more closely, the CO2 emissions per capita in the UK were the highest throughout the 4 decades, yet said the amount of emission was a steady decline. Yet said the amount of emission. This doesn't make sense. I'm not quite sure what the meaning is here. Yet, maybe it's supposed to be yet the said amount of emission, potentially, was a steady decline. I don't think so. It was a steady decline. Maybe steadily declined. Perhaps. So looking at the graph more closely, the CO2 emissions per capita in the UK were the highest throughout the 4 decades, yet the said amount of emissions steadily declined. Makes more sense. I really like this link that they've got at the start of the paragraph. I think that's a really nice linking phrase to introduce the body. So I like that a lot. In 1967, the average production of CO2 in the UK was nearly 11 metric tons, but by 2007 that had fallen to roughly 9 metric tons. Okay, we've got some nice detail. Okay, they're giving me specific figures, okay, from the graph, which is nice. I really like this phrase, had fallen to roughly. Okay, that's a very natural way of introducing and describing data. So I think that's a really nice way to phrase it. A similar pattern can be seen in the mean amount of CO2 emissions. The mean amount, okay, do we know what mean is? This is like a English maths word, okay, it also means average. Okay, so this is a really nice way to paraphrase average. The mean amount of CO2 emissions. Starting from 8 metric tons, the emissions in Sweden reached the highest point of approximately 11 metric tons in 1977 and then continuously decreased, dropping to just over 5 metric tons in 2007. Yeah, I like this. This is a really nice detailed paragraph. They've picked out sort of key points of information. They've given me some specific numbers. They've described it dropping to just over, continuously decreasing. A similar pattern can be seen. So what they've done really nicely is they've linked all these sentences together and linked all these ideas together. So this is a really good example of a detailed paragraph where they've described nicely without just listing all of the numbers. So what some candidates do, they think they have to do in the detailed paragraph, is they say, for the United Kingdom in 1967 began at 11 million metric tons. By 1977, it decreased to just under 11 million. By 1987, it was 10 million. So some students think that you just have to list every single number, but you don't. You just have to pick out the most important ones, and that's what this candidate has done. So that was quite nice. Let's look at the next paragraph. Conversely, again, good linking word. Both Italy's and Portugal's, I would say both Italy and Portugal's, so it should just be together. Both Italy and Portugal's carbon dioxide emissions per person soared between 1967 and 2007. Okay, again, a nice describing word. That's a nice paraphrase of increased. Italy's CO2 emissions nearly doubled, starting at just above 4 metric tons in 1967 and ending at almost 8 metric tons 4 decades later. Portugal's CO2 emissions, however, nearly quadrupled. Again, nice vocabulary here. Do we know what quadrupled means? So quad, 4, okay, so it basically means times 4. The per capita average in 1967 was just 1.5 metric tons, but in 2007 the emissions had reached 5.5 metric tons, matching Sweden's average. Again, really great descriptions, great grammar, nice descriptions. They've not just told me in 2007 the emissions had reached 5.5 metric tons, but then they've added an extra part in matching Sweden's average. So again, we've got comparisons throughout. They're sort of adding more to their sentences more than just robotically telling me the details. I think this is a really great answer. So in terms of task achievement, I would probably definitely give this a 7. They had an introduction, they had an overview, and they had nice detailed paragraphs. Cohesion and coherence, again, definitely probably a 7. They linked everything together nicely. They introduced the data. Vocabulary, again, a 7. They had nice vocabulary, nice native speaking phrases. I liked a lot of their paraphrases, and I didn't really see much issue with the grammar. So I would definitely give this an overall 7, and that's just me being cautious. I think if they submitted this in a real exam, you could perhaps score a little bit higher, 7.5. But overall, I think this was a really good effort and confident to say that it was a 7. So this candidate should be really happy with what they wrote and try to write to that standard in the real exam.